Good afternoon, everyone. So happy to have you joining us tonight for our event on Know Your Rights as a Protester. We know that it is Tuesday, the week just started, and yet for some of you, it's probably like back meetings, and yet you're still here. So thank you for prioritizing this event with us. So I'm going to go into a little bit more formal introduction of who we are and what we're here tonight with all that logistical information's being shared already. So my name is Ta Par. I am the co-executive director for BCTRHT, and that is my colleague Elizabeth Garcia over there. For some of you, if this is your first time meeting me, my name, you could pretend like it's like Tada, but just the Ta. And so that will resonate and you'll remember my name. I'm seeing some new faces. I met Mike from Kalamazoo. I don't know if there's other folk from Kalamazoo, so thank you for coming all the way. And then to all of you who are new faces and familiar faces, welcome to our event. At BCTRHT, our vision is a community where all belong, thrive, and are free. Our mission is to create spaces for people and organizations to share stories, connect, and work together toward shared goals. Our theory of change is that transformation begins when a community is connected and rooted in love, care, and abundance. It is because of these mission, vision, and theory of change that we're here tonight presenting to you Know Your Rights as an activist or as protesters. I've been learning a lot about what is civic responsibility and civic duty. And for me, what really stand out is this responsibility to be informed citizen. We have the responsibility to educate ourselves and also continuously re-examine what we think we know, because there's always nuance to things. So this is an invitation to really inform our community about what are our rights, what are some of the assumptions that we might have, and just really be informed, because knowledge is power. And so this type of event is under our Know Your Rights series of events that we hosted. This year we hosted an event on diversity, equity, inclusion. We hosted an event on immigration, and today is on protest. And next year we'll have 3 more events tied to informing and educating our community about rights. So stay tuned, follow us if you have not on Facebook, and get connected to our social media or our newsletter. The reason why we want to host this event as we think about Know Your Rights and why protest, what we value at TRHT is that, at the core of democracy is the freedom of speech, assembly, and protest, and these rights that allow us to disagree, debate, and advocate for change without fear. Protesting has always been a powerful tool used throughout history to advance justice, equality, and the values communities hold dear. For civil rights to labor rights, from women's suffrage to immigration justice, movements have been rallied on protests to make voices heard and drive lasting change. This event is about re-engaging that tradition, reclaiming protest not as an act of division, but as an act of democracy. Together, we want to equip our community with the knowledge, tools, and confidence to advocate safely and effectively. By understanding our rights, learning from past movements, and standing together, we can strengthen our role in shaping a more just and inclusive future. Tonight, we begin our program. I want us to reflect on this quote that I heard this morning, actually. And the quote says, "Focus on what you're fighting for and not who you are fighting against." And so I'll just say that again. Focus on what you are fighting for and not who you are fighting against. When we focus on the who, this is where polarizations get deepened, and that's not what we're here to do. So as we are going to be talking about the rights and how that gets interpreted, we want to invite you to just really invite yourself. Am I focusing on the what I care about or the who, or getting caught up in who? And so just a point of reflection as we hear our presenter and panelist conversation later on tonight. We're very excited to have amazing people that will be presenting and sharing the Q&A as well in the panel conversation. And I'm going to introduce them when we start the panel conversation. So I just want to start off. I totally forgot about this, where we had the vision, mission, and theory of change. So we'll go right into presentation. And for this, we're going to invite Eric Green to share with us what is our rights. And I'm going to read a brief bio on Eric so you know who will be speaking. Eric Green, and his parents are here. That's amazing. Yeah, just got to meet them. So Eric Green is the Vice President for Communication and Advancement at Kellogg Community College, where he leads strategy, partnership, and communication. With a background in journalism and public service, Eric has dedicated his career to ensuring communities have access to information, education, and civic engagement opportunities. He will provide an educational overview of First Amendment rights, and Eric will elaborate a little bit more on himself and how it connected to tonight's event as well. Let's welcome Eric.
Thank you, Ta. Good evening, everyone. I'm a little taller than Ta-da, so I'm going to raise the mic a little bit. Yeah, I'm never sure what the crowd's going to be like, so I bring my parents to everything. So, so I can have at least a couple of fans in the crowd. No, I'm kidding. They are Battle Creek residents and interested in this information, just like all of you. Oh, thank you, Elizabeth, or whomever just did that. Yeah, was really glad to hear Todd talking about the importance of the First Amendment and the importance of freedom of speech, not as dissension or I should say, not as an act of disloyalty, but as an act of democracy, as an act of patriotism. And that's kind of the mindset that I have when I think about the First Amendment. What I'm going to do this evening is tell you, first of all, a little bit about myself. Here we go. So I am the Vice President here at KCC for Communications and Advancement. I've worked here for about 13 years. So on behalf of KCC, welcome to our wonderful home here. Show of hands, who has never been on this campus before tonight? Oh, just a couple. Okay, so most people are familiar. That's great. Prior to coming to KCC, I was a professional reporter and editor at newspapers in Michigan and Montana for a total of 19 years. And as a journalist, I exercised my First Amendment rights on a daily basis, gathering information, publishing it for mass audiences. And at KCC, I do have the privilege of helping the college interpret First Amendment issues as they arise and implementing our own freedom of expression policy on our campuses, which I'll talk about a little later. Over the years, I've written magazine articles about the freedom of speech, campus speech. I've worked with lawyers directly on First Amendment challenges, even in federal court. I've flown to places like Texas and North Carolina to advise other community colleges on their own free speech issues and free speech policies. So I am not an attorney, but I have been involved in exercising and interpreting First Amendment issues for my entire 32 career in communications. So when it comes to the First Amendment, I'm one of those that might know more than most, but less than some. So I try to offer what I've learned with all of you so you're armed with good information. Over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to do as assigned by Elizabeth when she reached out a couple weeks ago, which is to give an overview of the First Amendment, discuss protected versus unprotected speech, and share some information about time, place, and manner limitations. And to squeeze all of this into 15 minutes is going to be a challenge, but I think I'm going to deliver. I also want to say, in case you're wondering, I did not use AI to make my presentation tonight. Thank you. My people, Jill. Not at all, and I'm proud of that. Okay. So let's begin by looking at the text of the First Amendment. It's one small but powerful paragraph in the U.S. Constitution. It's been the subject of countless books, lawsuits, court rulings, political debate, and activities ever since it was enacted in 1791. And it says this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. And to petition the government for a redress of grievances. It's important to note here, even though the law specifically says Congress shall make no law, that courts have long interpreted this language to mean and apply to any form of government, local, state, or federal. They are all required to follow the First Amendment and are prohibited from doing anything to violate it, the people's rights. And that means the First Amendment applies to federal, state, and local governments, including county sheriff's departments, public school districts, public colleges like the one you're sitting in, public libraries, any other governmental institution whatsoever. Now, conversely, Private companies, private individuals, and private organizations are not held to this same standard because the First Amendment prohibition on what the government can't do only applies to the government. So this is why, for example, a private employer might fire an employee based upon the content of that employee's speech in the workplace, but a public employer, like those that I just mentioned, cannot. This is why it's sometimes confusing for people when they see different actions happening as it relates to free speech in the public sector versus the private sector. People often think of the freedom of speech when they hear about the First Amendment, but there are actually 5 freedoms that are constitutionally guaranteed in the text we just read, and those are religion, speech, press, peaceable assembly, and petition. For today's discussion, you need to understand 3, and that is speech, assembly, and petition. I'm going to give you a slide on each one. So free speech advocates often contend that the freedom of speech is actually the most important right contained in the U.S. Constitution because it's a foundational freedom in this country and it intersects with so many other freedoms. With few exceptions, it allows individuals to express themselves without government interference or regulation over the content of their speech. I'm throwing some terms at you, by the way. Hopefully you'll become more familiar as we go on, but I'm talking a lot about the content of speech. We'll talk later about the time, place, and manner of speech and how that is different. Now, by constraining the government in this way, it allows people to freely exchange ideas and freely exchange information and express themselves. And in this context, free, quote unquote, means free from governmental consequences such as arrest or imprisonment, or policies or laws that specify what individuals can and cannot say. It doesn't mean free from other consequences that one may experience in their professional or social or political lives. Ideas and expressions can be positive and constructive, or they can be downright ugly and hurtful, but they are generally all protected as free speech, including words and symbols that some Americans would consider to be hate speech, and that is sometimes news to people. More on hate speech in a couple slides. The rights of assembly and petition are also part of the First Amendment. The right of assembly guarantees that people can gather as a group to exercise together their individual speech rights. And by the way, the founders who crafted the U.S. Constitution absolutely advocated for a right to assemble because they saw this as a way to keep government power in check and prevent tyranny, their words. The right of petition means they can complain about their government or demand change without fear of reprisal from the government itself. And this includes the right to file lawsuits against the government, collect signatures for ballot initiatives, organize letter writing campaigns, and the like. So you can see how all 3 of these freedoms do intersect in the First Amendment. So we're going to talk about time, place, and manner. I'll define that, but let me give you a little bit of background so you can see this in a little bit of historical context. In 1789, the Constitution became the supreme law of the land in the United States, but it was drafted after a series of political compromises that were made to settle political disputes that existed at the time. And even as the original Constitution, pre-Bill of Rights, was being drafted and ratified, they were already working on the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. And some states, including North Carolina, for example, refused to even join the United States until the Bill of Rights was ratified, which it was 2 years later in 1791. Now, I share this to demonstrate how important the First Amendment and all of the Bill of Rights was to the formation of the federal government back in the late 1700s. So over the past 234 years, numerous government actions and lawsuits have been settled by the Supreme Court, which has issued more than 300 rulings over those 234 years about the First Amendment itself. So the debate continues to this day. There's questions about what is protected speech, what isn't protected, what the government can do, what it can't do. They all persist in our culture and in our courts, and you may hear more of this debate tonight from some of our panelists. But thanks to those 300 plus rulings, many important legal questions about the First Amendment have actually been settled. And one crucial clarification is this one. The government cannot regulate the content of someone's speech, but it can regulate the time, place, and manner of speech-related activities as long as those rules apply to all forms of speech and all speakers. For example, The government can have a rule or a law that limits speech activities to certain times of day. An example of this is actually a local noise ordinance, such as one that's currently on the books in the city of Battle Creek, which says, quote, or it prohibits, quote, yelling, shouting, hooting, whistling, or singing in the making of any loud noise on the public streets between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. So notice how the ordinance applies to everyone equally. It only applies to activities occurring on public streets and doesn't specify the content of the noises. I don't know if this ordinance has ever been challenged in court on First Amendment grounds, but it is a common type of ordinance all across America. Probably would hold up in court. Another example is the use of a permitting process for marches or parades that would temporarily close city streets. And if your city, like Battle Creek, has a process for closing streets for holiday parades and 5K races and other reasons, block parties, the First Amendment would say it also has to allow that process for protests and marches that would close the street. Again, it must be a content-neutral process, so you can't say yes to some and no to others. It has to be an equal set of rules for everybody. Now, speaking of street closure, and this may come up later in the panel, but Michigan currently has an existing law that says blocking or impeding traffic without a permit is a civil infraction subject to a $100 fine. But there's been a bill introduced just recently in the Michigan House of Representatives that would make that same activity a misdemeanor, so in other words, a criminal offense, and punishable by up to 93 days in jail and a $5,000 fine. So legislators are currently debating whether such a bill is necessary and whether it would create a chilling effect on the people's right to protest. So that's another term I want to define for you. A chilling effect is a legal term. It means the government is creating a policy or doing something that actually deters free speech from occurring or assembly rights from happening through laws or regulations that target activities protected by the First Amendment. So a chilling effect can occur even if someone thinks the government may take action against them because of their speech or association and then opts not to express themselves or opts not to attend the protest or opts not to say something when they otherwise would have. That's a chilling effect. As yet another example of time, place, and manner, KCC itself has a freedom of expression policy, which I helped write years ago. It specifies time, place, and manner restrictions on our campuses. In short, we limit expressive activities to the times when our campuses are open. So in other words, when our campus is closed, we do not allow people to come here for expressive activities. We limit it to the outdoor grounds, all of the beautiful lawns that you saw outside, the sidewalks and so forth, and one indoor location. That's the student center right outside these doors. We also prohibit the use of audio amplification and pyrotechnics so as to preserve the learning environment. Now, that's a reminder that a college campus is a place for academic performance and learning, teaching. And so that's why we have these rules, and our policy is well vetted by First Amendment attorneys and experts who helped us craft that policy. So, and probably some of you can't read this. I apologize for the small type, but I had to create a long list of some of the activities. I got 5 minutes left. I can do it. Thank you, Elizabeth. So let's say you've decided to participate in a protest or a counter-protest, whether it's organized or spontaneous. Here's a list of some of the activities that commonly occur at protests and that are protected by the First Amendment. So in other words, the government can't prevent you from doing these things. The police cannot legally arrest you for engaging in these types of activities. So chanting, holding signs and banners, wearing expressive clothing. Recently, there's been protests where people are wearing like blow-up suits or whatever. That's expressive clothing. Symbols, giving speeches, silent protests, because you don't have to use your voice audibly to actually express yourself. Gathering in public spaces, marching along public routes, recording everything you see as long as it's on public property, distributing materials, talking to reporters, collecting signatures, and so on, praying, singing, playing music. Now this one I will mention, I mentioned the noise ordinance earlier. So you can play music, recorded or live, as long as you are in compliance with your local noise ordinance, which is separate from the First Amendment. Last one on here is burning a flag. Yes, that is allowed depending on certain local rules. Like I mentioned, for example, KCC doesn't allow people to set things on fire on our campus. That's not about the flag, that's about everything, and that's a safety issue. So as you look at this list, think of the protests you've attended or seen on television. Were the participants singing or chanting things that you thought were disrespectful? Well, those are protected activities. Or were they wearing costumes or carrying signs that you found offensive? Those are also protected activities under the First Amendment. Or were they burning the American flag? And this one is certainly controversial, has been for decades. But the Supreme Court ruled in 1989 that this is a protected form of expression under the First Amendment. There was also an interesting case recently in the news in which a man in Washington, D.C. was walking a few steps behind several National Guard members that had been deployed there. He was on a sidewalk, and he was following them, and he was playing music, probably off his phone or something. But the man was arrested and briefly detained by local police, and he was released within minutes, but now there is a First Amendment lawsuit that claims that the man's free speech rights were violated because the police did detain him. That has not been adjudicated yet, but I'll be interested to see how that one comes out. Speaking of arrests, and I look forward to Sheriff Hinckley's expertise later, but police officers are often present during large public protests, but their primary job is to respond to unlawful conduct and treat protesters and counter-protesters equally. And even the individual actions of law enforcement personnel have to remain content neutral. So by comparison, here's a list of unprotected activities. These are things that are generally unprotected because they might be an actual civil infraction. They could be a criminal offense on their own, or they might create a public safety issue. So the first few things like false defamation or a genuine threat or blocking access to buildings, impeding ingress or egress, that's about protecting people's individual rights as well as public safety. Obstructing traffic, excessive noise, we talked about that one, the use of fire or pyrotechnics. Then you've got some that talk about affixing materials to buildings or vandalism or looting. Now we're getting into criminal law. These things are actual crimes that you can be arrested and prosecuted for. Fighting words, inciting violence or imminent lawless action, trespassing, disrupting in governmental proceedings, obstructing police operations. None of these things are First Amendment expression activities. They're all covered by other bodies of law. As a side note, everybody is familiar with the Boston Tea Party. The actual Boston Tea Party from the 1700s. A lot of people have studied that in school. It's interesting to examine the details of how that happened. People broke onto ships. They stole a bunch of material. They dumped it in the harbor. And a lot of people do celebrate that as a form of protest. Well, if that had happened in 2025 under current American law, a lot of that would actually not be protected speech under the First Amendment. You would have potential crimes there such as breaking and entering, theft, vandalism, and littering. And so keep that in mind. They absolutely had the right to protest the Tea Act that they were protesting at the time. But in 2025, they would not have the right to do those other things. Quick word on hate speech. The important thing to know from a legal perspective is in the U.S. there is no established definition of what is or is not hate speech. Individuals and organizations often describe hate speech as expression that vilifies, humiliates, or incites hatred against individuals or groups. But the U.S. Supreme Court has said there is no exception for hate speech in the First Amendment. In other words, hate speech is protected by the First Amendment. And my final points, because I'm out of time, I just want to reiterate that the freedom of speech is a foundational right, and it is only there if you exercise it and protect it. It does have an intersection with the rights of assembly and petition, all of which are guaranteed by the First Amendment. And while it has wide protection for speech, its protection is not absolute. The government can impose reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. And finally, while people have protection from governmental interference, they can still experience consequences, positive and negative, from their neighbors, their peers, their friends, their voters, their campaign donors, family members, employers. Like there can always be consequences for how you use your voice, just not from the government. So I hope this gives you a basic understanding of the First Amendment, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panel.
Thank you to Eric for a very well-crafted information for us tonight. And Eric also did bring a sheet with all of the sources. So if you're interested in learning more, they are out there with all references to the materials that he presented tonight. So I just want to share that with you as well. I felt like I needed to bring like my notebook and start taking like lots of notes. I don't know if that's how you all felt. And there were some questions that came up for me as I was listening to him. And so if you are like me, write your questions so you don't forget. We do have some papers out there. And during the Q&A later on the evening, you can ask some questions, and hopefully Eric would be more than happy to answer some of those questions for us later on. And so thank you again, Eric. And now we're going to move to the second part of our program, which is the panel conversations around how do you, when you actually exercise the freedom to assemble, the rewards, the challenges, and the risk. And so if the panelists would be so kind to find your spot in your, there's a name tag in front of it. And so if you would be so kind to seat yourself. And then I'll introduce each and every one of you, and we'll go into the conversation. So the way how we're structuring this part is that Elizabeth and I get greedy, right? When we have amazing people in the room, we have so many questions that we want to ask them. And so we are greedy with our questions tonight. And so therefore, we're going to have a time limit for your response so we can get to some of the questions. Elizabeth will be the timekeeper back there, and you'll have about 3 minutes, and then she'll give you a 1-minute reminder per question. And then in front of you is the agenda with a series of questions that we'll be asking. I won't necessarily go in the order. I might hop around based on what feels relevant in the flow of the conversation. And so you have that as a reference. So let me introduce to the audience who you are. And I'm going to start with Sheriff Hinckley, who is right next to me. Sheriff Stephen Hinckley has served Calhoun County in law enforcement for more than 3 decades, holding roles from parole officer to detective before being appointed sheriff in 2020. In addition to his law enforcement career, he has taught criminal justice at Kellogg Community College and served on a statewide and national law enforcement boards. He brings the perspective of public safety and law enforcement to this conversation. Thank you, Sheriff. Next is Pastor Dr. Monique French. Pastor French served as a pastor of Washington Heights United Methodist Church and as a Calhoun County Commissioner. She has a passion for mental health advocacy, social service, and housing justice, and works to reduce stigma and expand access to resources in the African American community. She will share insight from her role as both a community leader and elected official. Thank you, Pastor French. And then we have Jolene Weiner-Vetter. Thank you, Weiner-Vetter. She is the Assistant Public Defender with the Calhoun County Public Defender's Office. Based in Battle Creek, she has nearly 30 years of legal experience and handles criminal defense at both state and federal levels across Michigan. Her work involves protecting constitutional rights, representing clients in complex legal matters, and ensuring fair access to justice. Thank you, Jolene. And we have Diab Harris II. Born and raised in Battle Creek and a member of the Nadawasapi Huron Band of the Potawatomi, Diab Harris has long been engaged in community leadership. His background includes youth grant making, grassroots organizing, and public policy work at both local and national levels. He brings experience in advocacy, civic engagement, community organizing to this discussion. Let's welcome our panelists. So without further ado, we'll go right into our questions for the panelists. The first one will be Jolene. And the question to you is, what are some common misconceptions people have about their protest rights in Michigan? And what do you want people to remember most if they choose to participate in demonstration?
Common myths, I think, include the fact that people assume that just because you're protesting, you must be a troublemaker. That's not necessarily the truth. I mean, to protest means that you are trying to make a change, either a change in legislation, a change for the better. Think of Rosa Parks, think of the Civil Rights Movement, think of the Vietnam War. All those took protests, rallies, sit-ins. Those are different kinds of protests. Those are different kinds of civil disobedience, if you will. depending upon what it is that you're wanting to do, protesting or the sit-ins or the civil disobedience. But I think that those are the biggest myths that people have.
Thank you so much. And then next, Sheriff Hinckley, from your perspective, how can protesters and law enforcement work together to ensure demonstrations are safe and peaceful?
Well, first up, I want to go on record. I have no idea what hooting is. Before I came up here, in case you asked, and I still don't understand. So I think it's so important, and I want to pick out the word safe out of this question. So, number one is I think it's so important that we communicate, and I think we are doing a good job in this community. I can speak for this community, 700 square miles, this area. We do a real good job of communicating, working together, discussing, talking, planning, and that I feel pretty confident we're solid on. And if we weren't, there's a lot of people in this room that would call me and say, Steve, I'm disappointed in you. And we need to have a conversation. We may not always agree with everything, but certainly it's a good conversation. Let's focus on the safe for a minute. So as you can see, a lot of our protests there are individuals in different communities that are unpredictable. And that unpredictability we have to really set back and say, when we are protesting, we have to make sure that we have a plan, because sometimes these people that are unpredictable certainly take advantage of protests, and by taking advantage of protests, people that are on a sidewalk or somewhere protesting legally, protected protesting, we have to be very careful and very cognizant of our safety, right? And so I have people ask me all the time, Sheriff, how do we protest? And I always point them. I say the ACLU has a great program, a great outline to look at on protesting, and then I say to them, my next question is when you're protesting, whoever is in charge of your group protesting, you need to listen to them, because when they feel a situation becomes unsafe and the situation is changing, maybe it's someone that is counter-protesting and makes the situation feel dangerous, the group leader may want to terminate and say, we need to leave this area and call law enforcement if they're not on scene here. Because the unpredictability of people, this is our lives, right? We're out protesting. We're doing something legally that we can do. And I think we just need to really focus on ourselves, our safety, as we're doing what we're legally, constitutionally protected to do.
Thank you. And next will be Diop. Diop, from your lived experience here in Battle Creek and beyond, what makes protest such a powerful tool for advocacy and change? What risks and challenges or rewards have you seen community face when they step into public protest?
Yeah, thanks, Ty. And I want to echo some of the sentiments made by Jolene. Protesting is a powerful tool, but it's only just one of many tools that we can use. And protesting is a way to move past a singular struggle and to demonstrate a collective struggle. Say you live on a street that has a lot of busy drivers, and the speed limit is 25, a lot of folks go 40. You may be peeved off that so many folks are driving fast down your road, so you decide to put up an obstruction. That is a form of protest. Whether or not it's productive, whether or not it's long-standing, those are different issues, but that is a way of making your voice heard by yourself to many others, to know that there is a concern to be addressed. In my career, I've worked as a youth grant maker here in Battle Creek, as a philanthropist, as a policy advocate, as a legislative staffer on Capitol Hill, and now I'm running for Congress. But when I was on Capitol Hill, one of my forms of protesting was to organize a union. Workers in our office, our voices were not being heard, and we would make our voices heard through labor organizing, through our work, the things that we can build, create, consume, and adjust during a day over the course of a collective mission, this office getting its work done. And because we had folks who were getting reimbursements cut, were working past hours and weren't getting overtime. We decided we'd band together, talk about our concerns, develop a strategy, and move forward. And one of the misnomers about protesting that it's just, a bunch of people going out in the streets and yelling. It's not that. Protesting is the act of building power. Not only are you demonstrating a concern that the community needs to hear, you also are practicing behaviors of building organization. Not just you having this concern, you've now reached out to your neighbors and your community members to join this cause. You have developed regular meetings. Now you have built an email list. You have talked about the laws, how you can practice demonstrations, how you can't. You've talked to each other about exactly the concerns and how you want to find redress. So protesting isn't just getting out holding signs. It is developing power from within and then using that power to make change in your community. And absolutely, there are more risks than can be listed, but the rewards are for your community to be treated fair, for your people to get resources. So if losing your job is not worth it, then maybe that's your calculus. But for a lot of folks, they are willing to make tons of sacrifices in order for themselves and for their communities around them to prosper.
Thank you so much. And I think what I take away from is that sometimes, as citizens, we might just think a protest just happened out of the blue, right? Everyone just show up with the sign, but there's a lot more that goes into, and it's really about, as you said, an act of building power. And there's a lot of nuance in how you organize effectively. Thank you. So Pastor French, what can local government do to build trust and open line of communication between community members, law enforcement, and elected officials?
Because I am the preacher of the bunch,
Oh, yeah.
I am going to find my notes and stick to my script. All right, can you hear me now? Yes. All right. So would you please ask that question again?
Yes. What can local government do to build trust and open line of communication between community members, law enforcement, and elected officials?
All right, so some of the things that I kind of jotted down, some of the notes, is actually coordinate and plan together with local officials. I think it's important to have that open line of communication for if you're going to organize something, to reach out and to get the proper permits, because permits are needed. Here in the city of Battle Creek, I know that you have to have the proper permits in place if you're going to do any type of festival, any type of parade, carnivals, anything of that nature. So I think coordinating and having things in place and having that open line of communication, because when you're communicating with each other, it gives you an opportunity to build that trust.
Thank you so much. And I think that was a little bit of what Sheriff also said, right?
Yes.
That open line of communication and leaning on each other when things don't go as planned. And being proactive and pre-planning really helps. Thank you. And so then we're going to go back to you, Jolene. And our question for you is, if someone is stopped or arrested during a protest, maybe like that one gentleman that Eric was talking about that was walking behind the National Guard, what should they do to protect themselves legally?
So I think what we really need to start with is what is it that we're doing in the beginning, even to just start the protest or to start the event. And as already indicated, you should have whatever permits. But also then you need to understand that you shouldn't be in the road under the new House bill, that the 4664, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But also that you can be on government property as long as you're not interfering with egress and exiting and entering of that building, and that you can be on sidewalks as long as people can still pass on the sidewalks. But there are some things too that you can do before you even begin, and that is the individuals that are coordinating the event should have people that have experience with maybe some Band-Aids or something to that effect, or should put out a route that's going to be taken for this protest, if it's going to be moving or if it's not going to be just in a standing position on a sidewalk, that Also, that there should be someone videotaping, not videotaping so that it goes to social media, but videotaping so that it's protecting the individuals that are actually protesting, showing that they are not the individuals that are violating the law, or maybe it's a counter protest that's violating the law, or what it is that made the breakdown. Because I can assure you that most likely the police officers are going to be videotaping as well, either through their body cameras or through cameras. I actually worked for a police department back in the 80s, Michigan State University, Department of Public Safety, and we used to videotape the riots where they were burning the cars and burning the couches and shutting down roads. And then that way we could go back later and decide if somebody was going to be charged or not. Well, your group should do the same. And again, not to put on social media, but to help protect those individuals that have joined your cause. So, but if you are, prior to going out, there's a couple things you should do. Bring as little as possible. Put a telephone number on your arm of who you can call when you're taken to jail, because the first thing they're going to do is they're going to take your phone away from you. Change your phone so that it doesn't have a face ID, but instead uses a passcode, that it doesn't use a thumb, so that the police officer can't take your phone and put it in front of your face to open it up for you while your hands are behind your back. Some of those kind of things. Bring some cash or a credit card. Make sure somebody at home knows when you should be home by, so that if you're not, they can call. I can't see that far. I'm so sorry. Thank you. So that they can call the jail if you're not home on time. If you're arrested, you need to ask some questions. Am I free to leave, or am I detained? If they say you're detained, then you are required to give them your identification or your name. We are a not required state. Michigan does not require you to give your name or your identification when asked if you're not under detained. So you don't have to, but if he says that you're detained, then you do have to. Then also I would say to you, do not do anything to move once you're being handcuffed. Don't step forward. Don't move to try to talk to the officer. Simply stand still and follow the commands of the officer, because otherwise you can be charged with resisting and opposing, which is a 2-year felony, instead of just the silly misdemeanor of protesting. Those are some of the things that I would say for you to do. And then give me a call.
Yeah.
I might be there. Who knows?
Yeah. I guess I'm going to say just a follow-up clarification. So if you do get detained, how do you get released? Like, do
They'll
they get?
take you to jail, and they'll set a bond, and then somebody's going to have to pay the bond. That's why I said bring some cash or a credit card so you can pay your own bond. But also why I said put the number on your arm, because they're going to take your phone, and we all rely on our cell phones now, right? Who really knows their spouse's telephone number?
That
So
one I do.
put it on your arm.
Okay. All right. And I guess Dave Marco is not here, but he used to tell me, if you get arrested and you have to go on trial, always plead not guilty.
yeah.
And that was the best legal advice that he gave me, because
Yeah.
then if you plead guilty, it doesn't move the process of, the justice system. So plead not guilty and then get connected to a lawyer.
Correct.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Jolene. Next will be Sheriff Hinckley again. Sheriff, from your perspective, what step can law enforcement take to build trust with communities who they may feel fearful or targeted during demonstrations?
So not do any of the things that she just said, like opening your cell phone and trying to do those things that we shouldn't be doing without a search warrant, right? I mean, let me make sure that we're clear. Law enforcement is here to protect everyone's rights during the protest, period. It doesn't matter whether you're protesting, we're here to make sure that everyone is safe and everyone's constitutional rights are protected, period. And in a lot of these cases, and I've been a policeman for 35 years, and as time has went on, and we have cell phones, and now somebody's videotaping their cell phone, and I remember the day when that happened, and I'm like, well, this is weird. I mean, what do we do? When we all learn from these things and try to and say, wait a minute, they can do that. And there's so many new things happening out there. And law enforcement, we're all human, right? We all learn all the time, and we try to do the best that we can do. But we're here to protect everyone's constitutional rights. And just like she mentioned about a police officer taking a phone and putting it in front of your face and using your face ID to to open that phone. We can't do that. We cannot access, that's like me walking in your living room of your home. I can't do that without a search warrant. If I want to access your phone, then I'll apply for a search warrant and ask the judge to review it. And if there's probable cause and they sign it, then we'll do that. But we need to make sure, we need to continue with our community to trust. It is so important that we all trust each other. It's so important that, like Pastor French talked about the permits, I don't know what permits are in Albion or Marshall or other communities. It's so important that you communicate. I have no problem if somebody calls and says, Sheriff, we're going to have a protest on this date and this location. We're getting these permits. We'd love to know. We'd love to know that way we know exactly what's happening in the community. And I circle back because you're hearing the public safety perspective of this. I am so concerned about everybody's safety and security, anytime, anywhere, any place, and especially protesting. You can see what's happening across the nation. I just would never want anything like that to happen to anyone in our community. So my perspective is the safety and security. Make sure we can do it safe. Make sure we can do it so we're all safe and secure during the entire protest.
And I think a follow-up question that comes up for me really briefly, I guess, moderator privilege again, is let's say that you did get arrested and then an officer violated those rights and did do forcing your open. What can we do as citizens?
Absolutely. So I'm proud to say to you is the sheriff's office, this sheriff's office, as we are now an accredited agency, the 5th sheriff's office out of 83 sheriff's offices in Michigan accredited. And what that does is that makes sure we have a commission, there's a commission that looks over all of our policies and procedures and makes sure that we are following those policies and procedures and making sure that we are in compliance with everything. So that really holds us to a pretty high standard. So if an officer violates something, and don't fight. I tell everybody all the time, I'm like, don't fight with the officer. Just, you know what, if they, don't fight with them. Your recourse is to go down to professional standards, file a complaint with professional standards and say, I feel like this was wrong and this officer violated something, and we will investigate that. And we will look into it, we will get back with you, and we will say yes or no. We've been pretty transparent in this community, and we will continue to be transparent in this community. That's what trust is built in. We are all one, we all form this bond, and we're all one stitched together community, and we all have to depend. I depend on you, and you depend on us. We all have to work together to make sure we get this. So we've been pretty transparent. We'll continue to be. Well, I mean, that's a great question. Anytime there's any violation or you feel like something occurred wrong, absolutely, you report it right away, and we will look into it.
Thank you.
Can I just piggyback on something he said, though, real quick? Because him and I actually talked about it beforehand, but I don't think I made it clear, and I don't know if it's clear, is during the protest, if all of a sudden it does become unsafe as determined by the police officers, they actually will say, okay, everybody, it's time to cease and desist. It's time to go home. And they actually will even help make an exit route for people so that they can safely get out of there. And they will actually give you enough time to get out of there safely. But if you don't get out of there and you don't do it within that time period, then they do have the right to arrest you. Because again, that's all about safety.
Thank you.
15 seconds. One last thing. And sometimes when we know where the protest is and where it's permitted at, we may see something that you don't see outside. We may have information about something bad that's about to happen, and we may say, hey, time out. Now, at the end, everybody leaves, and you're like, why did the police? You need an answer, right? You need an answer. Why did the police make us stop this protest and leave? We should have an answer for you. We may say, hey, we had some intelligence. This was going to happen, or something was happening. We may have something that we see that you may not see. And so there's just so many wheels turning in this day and age on information and safety.
Yeah.
Done.
Awesome, thank you.
Minus 1 minute.
Minus 1 minute for the next question. Okay. So thank you for that. And just another resource for those of us that are in Battle Creek. So if you get arrested, don't escalate the situation, right? And then if there's some violation, the other route is, calling the sheriff. And Sheriff Hinckley does make himself available and does provide his personal cell phone to residents that you can call. And then for Battle Creek Police Department, we have is it CRB? The Community Review Board, where COB, where you can formally bring complaints to, and then I see AVAR, the NAACP traditionally have been an entity that you can go and that can help you navigate those processes of filing complaint if you felt like your rights were further violated or mistreated by officers. So just want to share community resources. Okay, and then going to DIAP. What lessons from past organizing and advocacy efforts, whether local movements or a national campaign, can guide us in making today's protests both safe and impactful?
Yeah. First off, just quick question to the crowd. Does anyone remember when the first hands-off movement protests were? Anybody?
Lisa does.
Well, I'll throw it out there. It was 1939 in Harlem, New York. And it was Hands Off Ethiopia. It was a group of black citizens who were showing international solidarity with Ethiopia, the only country in Africa to not be colonized. So that was the first Hands Off movement. So fast forward to 2025, we think we have original ideas. Turns out we don't. So anytime you think that you're onto something new, you're probably not. You're just doing it a different way. So when we're in challenging moments, my message is that we need to, if we want to be forward thinking, we actually need to get back to the basics and figure out how it was done before. In this moment, rewind back to 2024, a lot of folks said it felt like 1968. Well, let's figure out how folks responded in 1969. That is our game plan. When we're thinking about, going forward and what type of moment we're in, a lot of historians are saying this feels like the moment during Reconstruction and those sorts of tensions. So if that feels like that moment, let's look to see how they responded during those times. So that's my message. Just continue to look at history and figure out those tools of the trade that have worked before and try to make them apply in today's context and age. How can we make protesting today more safe? That would be a question for federal law enforcement. Right now, we have folks, operating under the guise of Homeland Security, but are in reality ICE Gestapo agents. They are abducting American citizens. You are guilty first and proven innocent later. Right now, protesting is not safe, not because of citizens, but because of federal law enforcement. Now, I should separate that with state and local law enforcement are not participating in this. And I would say, sheriffs like Sheriff Hinckley across the state have, aired their frustrations about, being deputized or commandeered into, the work that the federal government is engaging in. So to make protesting more safe, yes, follow the rules of local law enforcement. Let's listen to Sheriff Hinckley. Let's look at what keeps us protesters safe, the rules and the guidelines put forth by ACLU and folks like that. But in order to make these protests more safe, we need to have conversations with law enforcement to have folks realize, what side are folks on? Are we on the side of Constitution, or are we on the side of the whims of a dictator in the making? Those are the conversations we need to be having.
Yeah, thank you, Dia. Let's kind of go into Pastor French, your question, and it might be modified a little bit based on what Dia just shared. And so we'll see how it lands. And so I'm thinking about Chicago, for example, right? I'm thinking about how there is the mayor and then law enforcement that are not necessarily in the same position with the federal agents, as you talked about. And so the question is, what is the role of elected officials like county commissioners, Pastor French, and how do you see the county responsibility in protecting public safety and constitutional rights when it feels like it's kind of threatened from external people or entity? Yes. So what do you think is the role of elected officials like county commissioner in protecting public safety and constitutional rights when people's rights are being violated from external entities?
Yeah, so we have a responsibility to uphold people's rights and to make sure that they are respected. And that's the reason why I said it's good for people to reach out when they're planning a protest or to show up at the county commission meetings, the city commission meetings, get on the docket, let your voice be heard, allow people to know what your concerns are. Reach out, because what it does, it helps to build that relationship so that we can plan together, or it can be planned together, making sure that the proper permits are in place. And those proper permits being in place, what it does, it helps because it helps to plan out the route. It also helps the law enforcement agency to build those relationships because they can come to the table with the planning process. So as a local government, we have a right. And I know that there was a bill that was introduced, it was alluded to earlier, 4664. And that, I think I'm going to be quiet until they introduce it. I was going to be prepared to give an overview of it. But it's more punitive for people of color, black and brown population. And so I think that we have to plan because it's important. Civil rights were, a lot of times were fought during protests. They were fought with protests. Protest gives us an opportunity for policy change. And the only way policies will change is if our voices are heard.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to go and talk about the bill that's been referenced a couple of times, House Bill 4664. And I'm actually going to ask Jolene if I'll just give a brief rundown of what it is, if you want to elaborate on it a little bit more.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'm good.
You're good? Okay. And so the House Bill 4664 would criminalize blocking public highway during an assembly, changing the current civil infraction to a misdemeanor or with potential penalty of up to 93 days in jail and or $5,000 fine. The bill was introduced in June of 2025, and I believe it went through the House.
Yep,
And is it in the Senate right now?
it is.
Okay. Is there anything you would like to add about the bill before we go into the questions?
So, actually, the bill itself, it actually already existed in a sense that it was a civil offense under 257 676B. So, and there it was, if you were in the streets or blocking a roadway or whatever, you could get a civil infraction. All they did was, the original bill under the new House bill made it so that if 10 or more people assembled and went into the roadway, that would lead to a misdemeanor. They took away the 10 or more people and they just put an individual in assembly, and if you went into the roadway, and then that is what the misdemeanor is for. It's a 93-day misdemeanor with a humongous fine. But I think that not only is that important as far as that it's a misdemeanor and there's a fine and that you can go to jail for 93 days, and that they've criminalized something that was previously civil, but I also think that there's a couple different things that you have to think about, and so I'm going to talk really fast so I can get them all done. One is that there's collateral consequences to those misdemeanors. Think about it. Some colleges won't take you if you have a misdemeanor. Sometimes you're not going to qualify for student aid if you have a misdemeanor. You're not going to qualify for public housing. You might lose a job if you already have a job and you're not allowed to have a conviction. Like myself, as an attorney, I have to report any convictions and I could put my license at stake. So there's these collateral consequences that now are in effect because they took it from a civil, pay your little fine, to a misdemeanor. And even though you could probably get that expunged, that takes 5 years of no other tickets or criminal history in order to get it expunged off your record, and you still would have to deal with those collateral consequences. I think what you also need to understand is that, I have my own conspiracy theory regarding this, and it also talks about how nonprofits with this huge budget can go into the street, but then think about it, panhandlers also impede somewhat on the traffic. When I decide to put $1 out into the panhandler and I might be blocking traffic. And so then I could get that misdemeanor too. So I think actually, and that's been litigated 100 different ways, and the ACLU has always come up and managed to beat that. But I think that if you read the statute and you know what they're about, that could also come through. There's also a statute, this statute is both state and federal, but there's also state and federal statutes in progress right now in Michigan and the feds that say that if you do impede the road and you get hit, it's your fault, not the car that hit you. It's actually, it gives them a complete pass in order to do that. Did she hold up a number at all, or am I okay?
Oh,
Okay, cool.
yes.
So, I mean, and there's a ton of them like that. There's a federal that there's to be no protest or anything regarding, and there's penalties for protest near judges and court officers. And then again, creating an affirmative defense for drivers who hit protests. I mean, this to me just talks and is like a whole nother way of impeding our freedom of speech and our freedom of assembly and our freedom of petitioning and protesting. So I think that that's something that you need to be aware of, is what are these laws that are coming down the pipe and will they pass or not? Okay, I'm out of time.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And then, so we're going to go to Sheriff Hinckley then. Knowing a little bit more about the House 4664 now, the House bill leave enforcement up to human discretion, and human carry bias, regardless of, how good intention we can be. How do we make sure that HB 4664 won't be used more harshly against Black immigrants or marginalized communities?
So I can only speak for my agency, my department, but again, I'll circle back to our accreditation and our reviews and our constant reviews, because any law, right? It could be this law, it could be any law that could fit into that category. We constantly review to make sure that that is not happening. That is our top priority, to treat everyone 100% fair. And sorry, I'm gonna pull this up. Stop my minute. No, I'm just joking.
You're claiming his minute.
I mean, we do that, but I want to follow up. I want to talk real quick about this House bill, because I want to make sure there's another side to this also, is even though, so it is a civil infraction currently, but when a police officer comes up to you in the road and says, you need to get out of the road, please get out of the road, and they're in the interest of safety and traffic concern, as long as they're within that, if you don't move and the officer has to move you, it becomes a misdemeanor. So I'll let the attorney correct me, but it's about 30 seconds away when the officer arrives. It may be a civil infraction now, but when the officer says, hey, please clear the roadway for the interest of safety and security of our community, get out of the roadway, and you say, no, I'm not going to leave the roadway, the officer has the ability to elevate that to a misdemeanor and say, I'm ordering you to leave the road. And the best thing to do is just leave the road. And I want to flip this, because if you don't leave here tonight thinking that I don't care about safety and security of people, so I was a fatal car crash investigator for almost 20 years. I did I was involved in almost all the crashes, serious crashes throughout the community. And the one thing I could never imagine is why a person would want to be in the road. Especially if there's a side, I would tell everybody, if there's a sidewalk, get on it, because you do not want to be in the road. We talked about unpredictable people, but let's just talk, there's human people out there that sometimes may not be able to see clearly, maybe there's sun in their eyes or whatever the case. Being in the roadway and without proper barricades or protections that maybe permit has given you, being in that roadway is just simply not safe, period. And I just can't find a good reason to be in the roadway protesting when there's so many other opportunities and so many other locations that you could do that. So,
I think the question was about how could we support law enforcement managing bias as it might be applied harshly, or the assumptions that it could be applied harshly to Black and brown folks or immigrants or marginalized community.
Well, I think that support sits right here in this room. There's many of you that I see, like I said before, that contact me, contact the chief, and when those issues and questions start to arise, you hold us accountable. And I've always asked everybody, I've said two things. You hold me accountable, I'll be transparent, but when we as law enforcement have to do something to protect our community, and it's justified, I just want you standing beside me when that happens. And I circle right back, and I feel so strongly about this. We are a community. We are together. We work together. It all has to function, and it all comes about communication, talking, and working through these issues, period. That has to be, and I tell you, I'm so proud of Battle Creek. I'm proud of Albion, proud of Marshall, proud of all my other communities. We have good, solid communications when there's issues. And sometimes we don't like what each other has to say. And you know what? Best thing about it is we sat down and we talked about it.
Thank you. So Diab, I'm going to reframe the question a little bit too on yours as well. So we talk about safety, like the word safety come up a lot. And I'm thinking about, people that are protesting ICE right now, right? Some people say, I don't feel safe right now. That's why I'd rather put my life in the line and advocate that I'm not safe so that the world can see that I don't feel safe when ununiformed people might tackle me or have kidnapped, right? My loved ones, etc. And so when we have bills like the House 4664, from your perspective as an organizer and advocate, how might laws like that make it easier to criminalize protests and people are protesting for their own safety to be highlighted or paid attention to by the larger community? How might that end up discouraging members from raising their voice instead of encouraging them to use their voice?
Yeah. So with HB 4664, obviously there's a slippery slope component, and just look at the end of the penetrator coming into Battle Creek. That's a highway. When does that highway stop? That's up to human discretion. So there could be a point in which, I don't see this coming here, but ostensibly someone could say, the highway stretches all the way down Division until it turns into Capitol, making our entire downtown unprotestable. But I'm sure, the other panelists, I don't want to belabor the points being made there. I want to talk about my experience as an organizer and activist at the federal level, and how that ties into our local community. So at the presidential level with this current administration, he has issued what's called a National Security Presidential Memorandum, NSPM, super wonky, but essentially it's more powerful than an executive order. An executive order just says like, oh, we need you to write some policies on some things, whereas a NSPM, that changes law enforcement posture. So right now, law enforcement is postured to be on the lookout for an anti-capitalist, for anti-Christians, for anti-Americans. And I want to ask all of you guys, what the hell does any of that mean? So right now, federal law enforcement is postured to look out for people who are anti-Trump. And I know that this is a nonprofit and this is a nonpartisan event, but we have to call this out because we haven't seen this before, and never have we had such unclear motives and unclear description of who is a criminal and who's anti-American. So while we have that going on at the national level, locally, and I'm sure folks who work at the county level to my left would disagree with this characterization, but we are engaged in a 287G agreement with the Department of Homeland Security, which means that our Calhoun County receives resources by working with the federal government. But in turn, we have gotten deputized or commandeered by ICE, in which our detention facility is used as an ICE detention facility. And I'm sure Sheriff Hinckley's job duties are starting to coincide more with deportation raids or sort of watches. So while the federal government has changed its posture, looking at its citizens differently, our local law enforcement has been commandeered by the feds. So it's the slippery slope. And where do we turn if the state is creating laws, the local are working with the Gestapo feds? That's for us to step up. that's where protesting comes in. That's where having conversations with law enforcement comes in. Are we going to listen to a president who's telling law enforcement to attack its own citizens? A conversation needs to be had, and that's what prevents that from happening. So I hate to be super scary talk, but as an activist, we all need to be prepared and organized.
Yes, and so I have a feeling Sheriff Hinckley want to comment on that. And we
Please.
had a session on immigration, and we touched on that briefly too. And so, if you could do a quick 30 seconds response.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
All right, all
'Cause
right.
Yeah. Yes, but we'll do a quick 30-second from Sheriff, because we did talk about this extensively with Sheriff before and in other events. And so,
Super quick history, way before me, back in the 30 years ago. The Calhoun County contract with multiple organizations to house prisoners at the Calhoun County Jail. We are currently contracted with Livonia, Dearborn, Westland. I can go into why would they want to send us the prisoners? I'll tell you if you want to know. It's more than 30 seconds. And then we've also contracted with ICE. We contracted with ICE under the Biden administration. We've contracted with the Obama. Obama, I think until now, I think deported more than anyways. So I just want to let you know we've been in this contract for 30 years. Are we a 287G? Yes, there are 3 different pieces to 287G, and you have to really clearly listen. 287, we chose to do a 287 because we could not serve a person detainee in the jail a legal document, because we also have U.S. court right in the jail. The person comes down to the courtroom, sits down. We could not legally serve them a federal document because we didn't have the authority to do that. The only reason we did that portion is to make sure that a person was able to get documentation that he or she needed during an event and get that quickly. We are not federal officers. I don't want federal authority. I don't have people to do that. I don't want to break the trust in our community. I want a person who is possibly a victim of a crime not to feel uncomfortable by calling us for an emergency situation. We are not going to anybody's house. We don't have federal authority. That is not our job. That is not our position. Do we contract? We do. And we have been for 30 years. It has just been a long history of doing that. So there are some very small nuances to this. But I want to make it clear. We're not going out and arresting anybody, and we don't have that authority. We don't have that right to do. So.
yes, and I think Sheriff has pledged that that's not something that the county will ever do, which is to go on the street and enforce, because again, that will backfire, right? Create mistrust among residents and citizens versus. Anyhow, so I'll stop there. This conversation around ICE is complex and require a lot of deep conversation, and Sheriff Kinley has made himself available and will be
I'll stay afterwards. If anybody has a call, stay afterwards.
yeah, to continue conversation. And the conversation now, like back in January, and now it's very different too with everything, how that's playing out. So there's just so much complexity, and I want to recognize the complexity. And so we're going to go to Pastor French for our last question. And the question is, you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, and so sorry again, I'm reframing it. So history show that laws like disturbing the peace or loitering were used most against civil rights activists. What keeps HB 4664 from becoming the modern version of that?
Our current constitution and state laws that we currently have in place keeps that from happening. If we advocate for it not to go into effect and have these conversations beforehand, I think that keeps that from really affecting Black and brown people. I wanted to
Go
kind
ahead.
of circle back and say the fine is $5,000, and so that's a big impact on people. So I just wanted to put that out there, that the fine that goes along with that is $5,000. Some of the things is we have clear guidelines. Some of the training, as the sheriff alluded to, them becoming certified, making sure that they're trained so that it's not discriminatory practices that are used against Black and brown people, that things are not heightened, so where that they are discriminated against, their rights. free speech is a constitutional right. We do have that opportunity to use free speech. Also, peaceable assembly, organizing, as Diop alluded to earlier, making sure that things are in place, having those conversations, bringing people to the table, having the community forums, making sure that we are well organized. These are some of the things that keep it from being punitive towards Black and brown people. Because if you get everything, the proper things in place, you bring in the law enforcement to the table, you bring in community leaders to the table, bringing the organizers to the table, it helps to build trust, and it also helps us to work together and bring about those policy changes.
Yeah, thank you. That kind of summarized our event together, and the key takeaway for me is that communication is always best when you bring everyone to the table and we all know what each one of us are planning so we can plan for safety. So thank you so much to all of our panelists, and if you could just give them our gratitude and a show of clap. Okay. So we do have a few minutes left and like to open up for the audience for a question. And then, Eric, would you mind just sitting here? Because I feel like some people might have a question for you because you did such a great job presenting. And then I saw some like multiple hands go up first and I couldn't see, but I think I saw Lucy and then the person with the mask. And then was there someone else in the back? And then Jose, 3. So 1, 2, 3. And then 4. Okay. Lucy, who? No, I know Lucy. And then the person in the back right there, that corner.
My question is about the 287G. So I know right now we have a warrant service officer level of a 287G, which is what you referred to, which is all within the jail itself, where we have had a contract, with ICE for decades. Is there conversation right now? Are we planning on? Are we talking about the highest level of the 287G, which is the task force officer model?
Negative. No, we have no interest in that. And I mean, I can list a million things, but we just had a major shooting over in Sheridan Township. We have a lot of things going on in our communities that we have responsibility for. That is the federal government's job. That is their responsibility. We don't have the authority to that. There was no talk of that. No.
And then low way in the back there with the mask.
Thank you.
Oh, it helps with.
Oh. Gotcha. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. My 2 very short questions are for Mr. Hinckley. One, the question that you were kind of dodging about how you and the law enforcement partners of this community can prevent the disproportionate policing of Black and brown communities with things such as this upcoming bill 4664. How are you going to prevent incidents like what happened to Luisa Martinez in the jail, an immigrant with disabilities who was fleeing torture in her country that was mercilessly beaten within your jail? My second question is, where right now is Mr. Isis Perez? And I'd like to read a very short letter from a man from Venezuela who was being held under ICE warrant in the Calhoun County Jail. He may already be back in Venezuela. Hello, I am Isis Perez. I am from Venezuela. I'm a political activist. I came to this country and entered through CBP-1 program. I was unjustly detained just because of my tattoos and being from Venezuela. Everyone who knows me in Venezuela knows that I am peaceful. The Catholic Church knows me and issued a letter. The political party that opposes the dictatorship of Venezuela also attests that I am not bad. I have never harmed anyone. I entered this country and have done things well. I obtained my work permit and social security number in this country. I have done things the right way. The times they scheduled me for ICE meetings, I have shown up until my last appointment in Grand Rapids when I was detained by ICE only because of my tattoos. I am here in jail unjustly. I have HIV that causes me a lot of fear. I am not being properly treated. I have taken good care of myself, but I feel very bad psychologically and emotionally. I am very afraid to return to my country. Please help me. Do not leave me, please. My life is at high risk in Venezuela. Upon arriving at the Venezuelan airport, I will be immediately arrested. All of us are persecuted to return, having been activists against the dictatorship. I will be detained, put in a very dangerous prison, and sent to be tortured. I have HIV and my illness will not be treated there, and they will cause my very rapid death. Here I am very afraid. Please help me. God will multiply your blessings greatly. Please learn about my life. I am not a bad person. I have tattoos like many other people, and that does not mean I am a gang member. I am a human being like any other person. historically, the excuse if I was just following orders or we had a contract has not helped anybody in a court of law. And so, yeah, those are my two questions. Thanks.
So I guess what, can you clarify your question?
What are you doing to protect this community, our neighbors, immigrants that we live with, from these policies?
So, I guess there's a couple of different ways to look at this. Number one, so we are a housing facility. Everyone that is held at the Calhoun County Jail is held by a court order, by a judge that has signed a court order, whether it's locally or whether it's federally. So I do not have the authority. Let me even go into medical a little bit so I don't take up the time. If someone is having a medical problem at the Calhoun County Jail, anyone can report it and we will look into it. The tricky part about some of these medical things is when somebody reports a medical issue with a person, that inmate has privacy surrounding, so I can't call back and say, we did A, B, and C to this particular individual because they have a right to privacy. So any of those things, a lot of those things you talk, if there's an issue with medical, we're on it. You let me know and we'll look into it. I just can't come back and say, this is what we did for a particular inmate. They have privacy. All right, so it's tricky. That's a tricky question that you ask me because I'm bound to protect that individual's individual rights, whatever I can say. I can't say much. That's tricky. On the other hand, I will go back to this again and I'll say, we are a housing facility. We house people that are being held on court orders by judges. I don't have the authority to say that anybody in this community, everybody in this community, anybody that's in the jail is held by a court order. And I know it's a tricky question to answer because it's tricky to answer, but I mean, that's what I can say.
So question with Jose?
Hi, good evening, Jose Orozco. Born and raised in South Texas, so I'm very familiar with the privatization of the prison system when it comes to a community. I saw it. My family's aunts, they worked in it. And then I moved to Michigan in 2020. And then I moved to Michigan in 2013. I moved to Battle Creek in 2020. And it was like going back in time, moving from Texas to Michigan, from the education system, from the police, superintendents, not seeing anybody that looks like me, from the top down, in a lot of the different areas that I just mentioned. When I got to Battle Creek as the executive director of VOSAs, one of the things that I was hearing was, hey, you got to close the ICE detention center. You got to get that closed. I didn't know anything about Battle Creek. The only thing I knew was that there was an ICE detention center in Battle Creek. That's what our community knew about the city of Battle Creek. So when we talk about community and beautiful and all that, that's a little black mark that we have there. But either way, when I got here that year in 2020, I remember hearing Sheriff talk about $4 million coming into the county via that prison. And that was in 2020. I wonder how much is being made today. Another thing that is different today from 2020 for me personally is I carry around my passport now. I'm worried about getting pulled over and getting arrested and going to jail right away just based on this. Mm-hmm. And that didn't happen in 2020. So I guess my question is, how much money have you made so far off our folks this year?
So, well, first off, I hope you don't feel that about us, about the local. I hope you don't feel that way about us. I truly hope. I'm very disappointed in me if I haven't, made myself clear that we are not. That is not our job. All right. And then how much have we made? So that's a combined question. Again, and I think this is fair to explain. We house for 4 different organizations: Westland, Livonia, Dearborn, and Immigration. So we just aren't housing for one particular organization. So altogether, you're right. We do make several $1 million from housing other inmates for other jurisdictions. That cost offsets the cost of services inside the jail, whether it's medical, whether it's patrol services. So that offsets and helps our community. But I completely understand, and I understand your question, and that's how I can answer it. I don't have a total. I'm sure I could get you a total that you need, but it is several $1 million.
Yeah, it's just because You were talking about other presidencies and other years, and I'm talking about right now.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I said, there's no way in heck that detention center is ever gonna close. There's 4 million coming into the county. So I'm wondering, that was in 2020, how much today? And we don't forget the contract we have in Albion, taking care of the little kids out there, right? I think that one's still active?
That
The one
is-
at Commonwealth?
We don't have anything to do with that. That is Star Commonwealth.
So you don't have a deputy out there anymore?
We do, yeah, there is a deputy assigned out there,
So then
correct.
you do have somebody out there.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you're asking, Star Commonwealth did contract, and there is a sheriff's deputy at Star Commonwealth for the safety and security of the entire facility overall, correct?
Okay.
Can I get a chance to address that? So congressional staffer, I've had a chance to talk with members of Congress, including Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur of Toledo. And when I let her know I was from Battle Creek, the very first thing she said to me is like, oh, when they raided the Toledo plants, all of our immigrants went up to Battle Creek and had to go up there. What's up with that? So I share your concerns. The city no longer has a familial tie to cereal. Now people think of deportations when they think about Battle Creek and its regional significance. I also, my congressional experience, I heard a lot from Auntie Maxine Waters, and she says when you're thirsty, you don't go drinking poison water. So if our county needs funds to recoup on other services we're providing, do we need to be partnering with an agency who is acting rogue? And to your point, ICE, this is not a new phenomenon. Yes, it's been ramped up to another level, but ICE has been unaccountable to the presidency since its existence, and since 2001 when it was birthed as a part of the Patriot Act or the Homeland Security Act. So this is not new. ICE has never acted within its legal bounds. In fact, right now they're lowering requirements for officers to join the force. So they're intentionally hiring unqualified individuals to carry out an extra legal purpose. So we've all learned here today that we have rights as citizens, and one of those rights is to petition our government. Looks as if we've got a couple of elected officials sitting right here. It looks as if we have state reps who could lend their voices in this manner. The folks who are signed on to this agreement, not just here locally, but are members of Congress. We have 2 senators and a U.S. representative. We can petition those folks to change the government. So as much as we've been talking about the issues, underlying under the surface is that we all have a voice and we need to use it. So if we're unhappy about our agreement with the federal government, let's change that. And I think there's a meeting on Thursday to talk about this exact topic.
And we have one other question over there, and that will be our last question for the night.
Okay, I'm just going to speak in general. I'm originally from Chicago. My name is Deb Evans. I finished growing up here, and I just have some concerns. I mean, we're living in a different time now, where the world is in chaos, and in this country in itself, just things, it just seems like we're traveling backwards instead of moving forward in a lot of ways. I'm concerned because I have children. I have three sons. And I do my best to keep them out of the system, but I've had family members that has been down there in the county as well as friends. And my concern is because I heard you say, like, if someone has a concern or complaint about, like, being mistreated, mishandled, this and that it would be looked into. And matters would be addressed. We hear that all the time, better training, this and that. It's like, it's just like, it's enough of the excuses of officers need to, have better training. I may make it a point to get to know the officers of this community because, I work in the schools and so I see a lot of them. And so if I get pulled over, I don't want to have that fear or that concern, that something's going to go left, So I'm just concerned, like, we keep saying better training, this and that. I mean, like, what does that mean? Where does that leave us, Because I had a brother, this wasn't under your watch, got beat up down there really, really bad. probably about like 5 years ago or more. And, he lived to tell it. But the thing of it is like, when we're going to get past the more training, because everybody get frustrated on both ends, So what do you say to your officers? Like, you have a person, and if they're not moving fast enough for them, you give them a command, and they're walking slow or whatever. Oh, well, you too slow, and you just take them and you just slam them, jack them up or whatever. I mean, that's wrong, right? That's wrong to do that just because they're not moving fast enough for you. So it's like, what is being done about that? Because we don't want people on the force that's just acting like criminals themselves.
I'm with you.
You're no better than us citizens out here, and I see that a lot. I hear that a lot. And it's just enough is enough. And we talk about protesting. It's going to get to a point to where that's going to happen. That's going to happen, because it's manifesting, because things are happening here in Battle Creek. And it's going to end up happening like in Chicago, because we're seeing law enforcement being too aggressive when it's unnecessary, to be aggressive with certain citizens, and it doesn't take a whole lot of people, per se, maybe on one individual, giving the situation. I know for you guys' safety, you have to take protocol, but sometimes it's just over the top. So for those that are doing that, what are you guys doing to prevent so that we know that, we can trust, we want to have that relationship of trust with the officers?
Yeah, so I'm in complete agreement. I don't think anybody in this room wants a bad police officer on the road. And we take action. If you give me a specific, we take action against that. We don't want them. You don't want them. It erodes the trust in our community, and we can't have that. And so if any of those incidents occurred, something inside of the jail, I can assure you, and look at it this way. You don't know me, I don't know you. We just have to either trust each other or have a conversation about it. But I'm just saying to you, if something like that happens in the jail facility, we will look into it. And I've had people in this room call me about incidents, and I said, let me look into it. Here's the answer. Here's what happened. Here's the truth. Either we were wrong or we were right. And I'm not afraid to say if we were right, but I'm not afraid to say if we were wrong. And I have nothing, everything that I have to lose is when we come to these things, when we come to this stuff, I have my trust and my character to lose. I will stand up for right whenever we're right. I promise you. I will argue right all day long. But when we're wrong, I will tell you we're wrong. And I've done that in the past, and I'm not afraid to do that. So I apologize if something happened. And 5 years ago was close to when I started to take office. So
Well, it was up under the other sheriff
Okay.
before you.
But I won't make any excuses for him. If we're wrong, we're wrong. Period.
So thank you for the question. And we're going to wrap up our conversation. I'm so sorry because we're 10 minutes over time and I want to honor people's commitment for the evening. But there will be a few people that will stay behind. So if you have more questions for the panelists that could stay, if you would be so kind to just answer a few more questions, we would greatly appreciate it. We want to thank Eric and the panelists again. So let's just give them a round of applause. So I don't know about you, but there were moments for me when I felt tension in my body tonight, and I think that was good tension. I think for a community to be strong and to be connected, we need to have these kind of conversation more frequently. And so we thank you for joining us, and we hope that more conversation will happen, and then conversation will lead to action, where we can really build a Battle Creek where all of us can be seen, feel safe, and can thrive.
Access Vision. Your voice, your community.